Sam Wick's finger rested on the trigger with 3 pounds of pressure already applied. 2 more pounds would send a 338 Lapua round through Dmitry Volkov's skull at 2,800 feet per second across Istanbul's Grand Bazaar. The tea shop door burst open. A girl in a blue school uniform ran straight into Wick's crosshairs, backpack bouncing, dark hair streaming behind her as she spotted her target. "Papa!" The word hit him like shrapnel. Welcome to Wick, SCIMITAR, another thriller from the Wick Files. A pulse-pounding action thriller series featuring Sam Wick in his early days as a TF-77 asset, written by Chase Austin and published by Thrillverse Media. Before we start, don't forget to grab your free books at thechaseaustin.com. Ready to enter Wick's world? Let's get started. About Wick, SCIMITAR. From 300 meters away, the shot would be clean. Simple. Perfect. Sam Wick has one job: eliminate the arms dealer selling Stinger missiles to ISIS before tomorrow's Lufthansa flight becomes a fireball over the Atlantic. 312 passengers. 1 trigger pull. The mathematics are clear. But when a 12-year-old girl runs into his crosshairs clutching a wooden toy soldier just like the one carried by Amara, the Afghan child he failed to save, the mission becomes something else entirely. The girl calls him Papa. Now Wick faces an impossible choice in the labyrinthine chaos of Istanbul's Grand Bazaar: save the daughter of a man selling death to terrorists, or prevent a massacre in American skies, protect one innocent, or save hundreds. Some promises can't be kept, some prices are too high to pay, some ghosts never rest. In the shadow world of TF-77, where America's necessary violence plays out far from public view, Sam Wick is becoming exactly what his handlers recruited him to be: a cleaner who erases problems without leaving fingerprints, even when those fingerprints are written in a child's tears. A devastating thriller about the true cost of protection, where the mathematics of morality never balance and the only certainty is that someone always pays. Now back to our story. Chapter 1. The Grand Bazaar, Istanbul, Turkey. Sam Wick's finger rested on the trigger with 3 pounds of pressure already applied. 2 more pounds would send a 338 Lapua round through Dmitry Volkov's skull at 2,800 feet per second across Istanbul's Grand Bazaar. The Accuracy International AWS felt like an extension of his nervous system, chambered with rounds that could punch through level 3A body armor at twice this distance. His breathing had slowed to the rhythm perfected at Fort Benning, then honed through 3 tours in Afghanistan, where a girl named Amara had taught him that some promises couldn't be kept. She'd been 12, same as his sister would have been, carrying a wooden doll carved by her father. "You keep me safe, yes?" she'd asked in broken English the day before the IED turned her school into rubble and her into a name he'd never forget. Her photograph was still in his cargo pocket, a reminder of why he'd chosen the name Samuel for TF-77 operations. The angel of death who still tried to protect innocence. The crosshairs settled on Volkov's forehead with mathematical precision. 300 meters below, the Russian arms dealer sat at a tea shop like he owned the world, which, considering he was selling FIM-92 Stinger missiles to ISIS, he might as well have. 8 months into TF-77, 1 month since Prague's clusterfuck where he'd climbed medieval clock towers while Czech intelligence tried to kill him, and Wick was finally getting the kind of mission that made sense. No concrete walls, no improvised weapons, no surveillance, no blown covers. Just clean, simple mathematics that justified his transformation from disgraced army major to ghost operative. Overwatch to cleaner. Her handler Keisha Williams's voice crackled through his earpiece, carrying the controlled fury of someone who'd watched the Twin Towers fall from her Brooklyn apartment window at age 10. Her brother had been a firefighter. Past tense. Target confirmed. Intelligence confirms the buyers are moving those missiles to Germany tomorrow. Lufthansa Flight 447, Frankfurt to New York, 312 passengers. You're green. Tomorrow. Not next week, not someday, tomorrow. Wick's finger tightened imperceptibly on the trigger, moving toward the glass-smooth breakpoint that would solve everything cleanly. Below him, the Grand Bazaar pulsed like a living organism, 61 covered streets and 4,000 shops breathing in unison beneath vaulted ceilings that had sheltered merchants since Mehmet the Conqueror's time. A dozen tongues created a polyglot symphony, guttural Turkish haggling over carpet prices, musical Arabic discussing spice blends, clipped German complaints about tourist traps, and the nasal cadence of tourists photographing everything with battlefield dedication. 6 centuries of commerce had compressed itself into these stone veins, each narrow passage thick with the accumulated weight of empire and exchange. Ottoman sultans had walked these corridors. Byzantine merchants had counted Byzantine gold beneath these same arches. The stones themselves seemed saturated with ambition, desperation, and the peculiar alchemy that transformed desire into currency. The air was a cocktail of civilizations layered like sediment. Cardamom and cinnamon drifted from spice stalls where pyramids of saffron cost more per ounce than cocaine. Fresh leather mingled with the metallic tang of silver jewelry, being hammered by craftsmen whose techniques hadn't changed since the 15th century. But underneath it all was something else, the peculiar musk of human trade compressed into spaces too narrow for the ambitions they contained. Sweat and hope and desperate calculation, the scent of people transforming need into negotiation, compressed into passages where a man could touch both walls simultaneously, yet still conduct business that spanned continents. It was the smell of civilization itself, distilled into its most essential form, the eternal dance between what people wanted and what they were willing to sacrifice to get it. Volkov was examining photographs of American military hardware with 3 men whose carefully groomed beards couldn't hide the fanatical gleam in their eyes. The mission had fallen into TF-77's lap through intelligence convergence that made McAvoy's job look easy. Volkov had diplomatic immunity as a cultural attaché. Traditional law enforcement couldn't touch him. But diplomatic immunity didn't stop rifle bullets, and when traditional solutions failed, TF-77 provided alternatives. Movement in the tea shop, Wick reported, adjusting his scope's parallax. Targets showing product samples, confirming missile guidance components. From her position in the mobile command unit 6 blocks away, Keisha monitored Turkish national intelligence feeds, satellite imagery, and radio intercepts that painted a real-time picture of the Grand Bazaar's controlled chaos. 26 years old, she'd evolved from Detroit street survival to NSA cyber warfare to TF-77 operational coordination, making her the perfect handler for operations that required both technical precision and street-level improvisation. Volkov opened the aluminum briefcase with a businessman's casual efficiency. Nested in foam cutouts like deadly jewelry were guidance systems and targeting units for shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles. Hardware that could turn any civilian airliner into a fireball over European airspace. But his hands trembled slightly, barely perceptible through the scope. But there, fear, guilt, or something else? Turkish liaison confirmed Stinger serial numbers match stolen inventory from Syrian depot. Keisha's voice carried the weight of intelligence networks spanning 3 continents. "This is our guy. Authorization is clear. Take the shot." Wick's scope tracked Volkov through the tea shop's window as he demonstrated targeting systems to his buyers. The lead buyer, tall, bearded, wearing a Rolex that probably cost more than most people's cars, was checking his phone with nervous energy. The second had a tic, touching his left earlobe whenever he laughed at something Volkov said. The third kept adjusting his sleeve to hide what looked like a prison tattoo. 4 pounds of pressure, 1 more pound. Clean shot, clear background, mission complete. The tea shop door burst open. A girl in a blue school uniform ran straight into Wick's crosshairs, backpack bouncing, dark hair streaming behind her as she spotted her target. "Papa!" The word hit him like shrapnel. Not because of the sound. He'd heard children call for their fathers in a dozen languages across Afghanistan, but because of what she carried in her small hands. A wooden toy soldier, painted green and red, clutched against her chest like a talisman, just like Amara's wooden doll. Wick's trigger finger locked against cold metal. Volkov's transformation was immediate. The cold calculation vanished, replaced by desperate affection that spoke of long separations and precious moments. He swept her into his arms with the fierce tenderness of a man who understood how fragile happiness could be. "Moya Dorogaya," he whispered, voice thick with relief. "How was school?" She showed him her homework, math problems, Cyrillic letters, normal childhood concerns that existed in parallel to international terrorism. But her toy soldier never left her grip, even as she pointed at numbers on the page. "Papa, I drew this for you," she said in accented English, pulling out a crayon drawing of two stick figures holding hands. "It's us in Moscow, when you come home." Wick's scope trembled imperceptibly. "Keisha," he said, voice tight. "We have a problem." "Define problem, Ari." "Target has his daughter with him." The silence stretched long enough for Wick to count 5 heartbeats through his scope. When Keisha spoke again, her voice carried the weight of 3,000 dead Americans and a brother who'd never come home. "Checking target files. Volkov's family should be in Moscow. Daughter enrolled in international school. Current attendance confirmed." Through his scope, Wick watched Volkov lift the girl onto his lap while continuing his conversation with the ISIS buyers. She showed him her homework. Cyrillic scribbles, numbers, a normal life unfolding while he negotiated the sale of weapons designed to kill civilians. "She's here," Wick said, his mouth suddenly dry. "Right here, sitting on his lap. Thermal imaging confirms small heat signature." Keisha's voice sharpened with the pragmatism that made her effective as both handler and reality check. "Cleaner. That child will have no father if ISIS shoots down a plane full of families tomorrow." "She'll have no father either way. At least this way, other children keep theirs. You have authorization. Green light stays active." Through his scope, Wick watched Volkov help his daughter with her backpack while continuing his negotiation with death merchants. The girl had moved to his lap now, showing him more drawings while he discussed missile trajectories with men who would use them to murder civilians. The ISIS buyers were getting impatient. The one with the Rolex was checking his watch with the nervous energy of someone working against a deadline. Tomorrow's timeline wasn't flexible. They had a specific flight to target, specific passengers to kill, specific terror to unleash on American soil. Wick's crosshairs centered on Volkov's forehead. Clean shot, perfect angle, minimal collateral risk, the kind of shot he'd made dozens of times in Afghanistan, before he'd learned that some victories came with prices too high to pay. 5 pounds of pressure. The trigger brake was glass smooth, inevitable, mechanical. 1 more pound and Lufthansa Flight 447 would land safely tomorrow evening. The girl looked up from her drawing, toy soldier pressed against her cheek and tilted her head as if she'd heard something. Her dark eyes swept across the Bazaar's chaos, not quite finding him, but close enough that Wick's breath caught. She was exactly Amara's age, exactly the same trusting smile, exactly the same faith that her father would keep her safe. A flash, unbidden, visceral, of Amara cowering in that Kandahar schoolroom while he'd promised to keep her safe. The sound of the IED 3 clicks away, close enough to hear, too far to help. Chapter 2. Wick released the trigger pressure. "I'm moving position," he said, the words coming from somewhere deeper than tactical training. "Negative. You have a clear shot. Take it." Civilian backdrop beyond target, moving for cleaner angle and better escape route. It wasn't completely a lie. The tea shop's position created narrow windows with foot traffic beyond, and moving would provide better extraction options. All tactically sound reasons that had nothing to do with a 12-year-old girl who reminded him why he'd chosen disgrace over compromise in Kandahar. Fold, detach, snap lock. In 90 seconds, the precision rifle became an electrician's toolkit. "Wick, you are not authorized to relocate." Keisha's voice carried the bite that suggested career-ending performance reviews. Return to Overwatch and complete the mission. Wick ignored her, moving across Istanbul's rooftops with fluid movement that came from urban warfare training and 8 months of learning to be a ghost. The Bazaar's electronic soup of cell phones and security systems would mask his thermal signature for maybe 3 minutes before Russian counter-surveillance found him. Russian security element, northwest quadrant, Keisha reported. Multiple heat signatures converging on your last position. They made your thermal. Wick glanced back to see 3 men in dark suits climbing onto his former rooftop with coordinated precision. Spetsnaz-trained, FSB operational experience, moving like predators who'd found their prey's scent. They made me, Wick said, dropping to a lower rooftop that brought him closer to street level. How long before target moves? Thermal shows them standing up, maybe 90 seconds before they reach vehicles. 90 seconds to cross 300 meters of Grand Bazaar chaos, eliminate a protected target without harming his daughter, and prevent tomorrow's massacre. The kind of timeline that made sniper rifles seem straightforward by comparison. Wick reached the Bazaar's edge and dropped into the crowd with practiced invisibility. Tourist season meant perfect cover. Germans photographing everything with battlefield journalist dedication, Americans complaining about prices in loud voices, and Turks navigating around foreign chaos with practiced patience. Perfect cover for movement, perfect chaos for concealment. Target moving, Keisha reported, tension bleeding through her professional calm. South exit, daughter with him, security flanking. Wick pushed into the crowd and immediately hit a wall of bodies. Tourist season had transformed the bazaar into a human gridlock. German tour groups moving in tight formations, their guide's umbrella barely visible above a sea of baseball caps and cameras. He tried to sidestep around them, but a family of 6 Americans had stopped dead in the narrow passage to photograph a carpet display, their teenage daughter taking selfies while her parents argued about exchange rates. "Excuse me," Wick muttered, forcing his way between a Turkish vendor carrying a tray of tea glasses and an elderly British couple examining silk scarves with archaeological precision. The vendor shot him a dirty look and said something in rapid Turkish that didn't sound complimentary. The bazaar's layout was burned into memory from 3 days of reconnaissance, 6 main passages, dozens of side routes, multiple exits. But reconnaissance hadn't accounted for the claustrophobic reality of moving through a human traffic jam while maintaining visual contact with a moving target. He caught a glimpse of Volkov's gray hair 50 meters ahead, then lost it behind a cluster of Italian tourists surrounding a jewelry stall. Wick pushed harder, using his height to track movement through the undulating sea of heads. But every step forward required negotiating past someone. A merchant wheeling a cart of leather goods, a group of students blocking the passage while their professor explained Ottoman architecture, a businessman talking loudly into his phone in what sounded like Dutch. Sir, very good price for American." A carpet vendor grabbed Wick's arm, trying to drag him toward a display of Persian rugs. Wick smiled tightly, extracted himself with polite firmness, and immediately collided with a woman carrying 3 shopping bags who glared at him like he'd committed assault. Where the hell is there? Volkov's daughter's blue school uniform flashed between bodies. 45 meters now, but they were moving faster than the crowd flow, using some pathway Wick couldn't see. Chapter 3. He tried to angle left toward what looked like a clearer passage, but found himself trapped behind a tour group that had stopped to listen to their guide explain the historical significance of a fountain. 20 elderly Germans in matching windbreakers, all facing the wrong direction, all completely oblivious to the fact that they were blocking the only route toward a target carrying weapons of mass destruction. "Entschuldigung," Wick said, trying to squeeze past. One of the Germans, a woman with a camera around her neck like jewelry, turned and smiled, launching into enthusiastic English about how wonderful Istanbul was, how different from Munich, how her grandson would love the souvenirs she was buying. Wick nodded, smiled, extracted himself millimeter by millimeter while keeping one eye on the crowd ahead. 40 meters. Where are they? A flash of movement, Volkov's security team, professional and alert, creating space around their principal with subtle body language that made tourists unconsciously step aside. They moved like sharks through fish, efficient and predatory, while Wick was stuck negotiating past a family arguing about lunch plans in what sounded like French. 38 meters, 35. The crowd shifted like tide, opening a brief channel toward his target. Wick stepped into it and immediately found himself face to face with a merchant selling brass lanterns. The man's arms spread wide to display his wares, completely blocking the narrow passage. "My friend, you like Turkish lamp? Very old, very beautiful, very good price just for you." "Not today," Wick said, trying to step around him, but the merchant moved with him, still talking, still blocking the path. Behind him, other customers were backing up, creating a human bottleneck in a space barely wide enough for two people. Jesus Christ. He could see Volkov 30 meters ahead now, the man's gray suit visible through gaps in the crowd, his daughter's hand in his, security maintaining their protective formation. But between Wick and his target was a maze of bodies, all moving in different directions, all with their own agendas that had nothing to do with preventing international terrorism. He spotted them again, 28 meters moving toward what looked like the south exit. Volkov in the center, daughter's hand in his, 3 security operatives maintaining professional distance while scanning for threats. They moved like a school of fish, coordinated, alert, protective of the pack, while Wick was stuck in molasses made of tourists and merchants and the simple physics of too many people in too little space. The briefcase full of Stinger components was still handcuffed to the lead ISIS buyer, who moved through the crowd with arrogant confidence, somehow finding clear paths that didn't exist for anyone else. The man had the predatory efficiency of someone who knew exactly where he was going, while Wick was trapped behind a group of teenagers taking group photos in front of a spice display. 25 meters. 22. A carpet vendor wheeled a cart directly into Wick's path. The massive Persian rug unrolled across the narrow passage like a roadblock. Wick stepped over it, nearly tripped on a corner, and found himself wedged between 2 competing jewelry stalls whose owners were shouting at each other in Turkish, while customers pressed against the walls, trying to avoid the commercial warfare. 20 meters, close enough to see the concern lines around Volkov's eyes as he scanned for threats, close enough to hear fragments of Russian conversation about school and friends drifting back through the crowd noise. But he was moving through quicksand while his target flowed like water toward an exit that would put them in vehicles and then diplomatic sanctuary. Every step required negotiation. Every meter gained came at the cost of precious seconds he didn't have. "Wick, abort and extract," Keisha commanded in his earpieces. "Russian security's coordinating with Turkish police. You've got minutes before this goes diplomatic." Wick ignored her, pushing through a cluster of German tourists photographing hand-woven carpets. 15 meters now, close enough for a pistol shot if innocent lives weren't hanging in the balance. But innocent lives are always in the balance, always have been. Volkov's security spotted him. The lead operative, scarred face, diagonal scar across his left cheek marking survival in places where mistakes meant shallow graves, spoke into his radio while maneuvering to intercept, professional movements disguised as casual shopping. Chapter 4. Wick was running out of time and options. Volkov's security team was coordinated, professional, and they had clear sightlines to their principal. In 30 seconds, they'd reach the exit and disappear into diplomatic immunity. He needed to separate them from Volkov, break their formation, create confusion they couldn't control. He needed chaos. Not the convenient kind, the earned kind. Wick deliberately shoulder-checked a carpet vendor's display, sending an expensive Persian rug tumbling into the narrow passage like a silk waterfall. The vendor, elderly Turkish man with hands stained by decades of woolen dye, erupted in rapid Turkish, gesturing wildly at his ruined merchandise. "American idiot!" the vendor shouted in English, gold teeth flashing in genuine fury. "You pay." "Very expensive. 2,000 euros. This was exactly what Wick wanted. He grabbed a handful of Turkish lira from his pocket, pressing the bills into the merchant's trembling hands along with some euros, more money than the rug was worth. "Carpet delivery!" He barked in fractured Turkish, pointing at the immense Persian rug dominating the shop's center. "Help me! Big tip!" The vendor's anger shifted to confusion, then greedy calculation. The commotion was already drawing attention from neighboring stalls, other merchants rushing over, some supporting their colleague, others sensing opportunity with the crazy rich American throwing money around. "You want this carpet moved?" the vendor asked, eyes wide as he counted the cash. "Yes. Right now. Block the path. Make big show for tourists." The merchant's eyes lit up as he understood. Tourist spectacle meant more customers, more sales. Together, they seized opposite corners of the colossal rug, 200 pounds of silk and wool that had taken master weavers months to complete. "Careful with edges," the vendor shouted to his nephew, who rushed over to help. "This is museum quality." They unspooled the massive carpet across the narrow passage like a vibrant hand-woven roadblock. The intricate patterns, hunting scenes, geometric designs, 6 centuries of Ottoman artistry, suddenly became an obstacle course stretching from wall to wall. Tourists shrieked in 3 languages as they found their path blocked by priceless art being deployed as performance theater. Vendors cursed in 4 more languages, some angry at the obstruction, others rushing to capitalize on the crowd now forced to stop and look at their wares. German tour groups crashed against the unexpected obstacle like waves against a breakwater. Their guide, waving his umbrella frantically, tried to explain that this wasn't part of the scheduled tour, while his charges began photographing the authentic Turkish carpet demonstration with delighted enthusiasm. The massive carpet created perfect chaos, exactly what Wick had counted on. Volkov's security team, moving in tight formation toward the exit, suddenly found their coordinated advance broken by 200 pounds of handwoven art and a crowd of tourists treating the disruption like street theater. The lead operative tried to push through but found himself trapped behind enthusiastic Germans taking selfies with the carpet. The second operative attempted to circle around, but the vendor's nephew was now explaining the rug's historical significance to anyone who'd listen, creating a bottleneck in the side passage. Volkov himself was cut off from 2 of his 3 bodyguards by the living obstacle course Wick had created. For the first time since leaving the tea shop, the arms dealer was vulnerable, separated from his protection by authentic Turkish commerce and tourist enthusiasm. The first security operative reached the disturbance just as Wick pulled out his suppressed Glock. The man was good, saw the threat, reached for his weapon, opened his mouth to shout a warning. But he was fighting through a crowd of angry carpet merchants while Wick had clear sight lines. 2 muffled pops barely audible above the bazaar's chaos. The operative dropped behind a hanging rug display, his fall cushioned by layers of silk that absorbed blood and sound equally well. Blood spreading across patterns that had been woven by craftsmen who'd understood beauty and violence as complementary forces. "One down," Wick whispered. "Jesus Christ, Wick. Extract now." The second operative was pushing through the crowd, scanning for the shooter while trying to maintain cover. But his slight limp, old shrapnel wound, probably Afghanistan or Chechnya, made his movement pattern predictable. Step, hitch, step, hitch. Wick waited until he passed, then put 2 rounds through his spine from behind a wall hanging depicting Ottoman cavalry charges in gold thread. The man collapsed silently onto Persian silk, his weapon never clearing leather. 2 down. The surviving operative found himself trapped on the wrong side of 200 pounds of hand-woven Persian artistry and a dozen confused tourists trying to photograph the unexpected cultural display. He was the professional older, calmer with the diagonal scar marking survival in places where mistakes meant shallow graves. Wick moved through the chaos like smoke through cracks, 10 meters from Volkov, close enough to smell his cologne, close enough to hear his daughter asking about dinner plans in rapid Russian, close enough to see fear bloom in Volkov's eyes as he recognized death approaching through tourist chaos. "Stay behind Papa," Volkov told his daughter, voice steady despite terror, pushing her behind him while reaching for a concealed pistol. Father and killer, separated by reflexes measured in milliseconds. But his hand was shaking now, not with fear but with something else. Wick saw it in his eyes. Relief. A man who'd been carrying unbearable weight, finally seeing an end to choices that had corrupted everything he'd tried to protect. "You're American," Volkov said quietly in accented English, his pistol half drawn but not aimed. "I can see it in your stance. Special Forces?" Wick's ceramic knife was already moving, undetectable by metal scanners, invisible to X-rays, designed for exactly this anatomy. But something in Volkov's tone made him pause. "She has leukemia," Volkov whispered, eyes flicking to his daughter, who was obediently hiding behind his legs while clutching her toy soldier. "The treatment in Moscow. Experimental therapy, American medicine, German doctors. They wanted 2 million euros. I had no choice." The knife hovered between Volkov's ribs, positioned over his heart with surgical precision. One thrust would end it. Stop tomorrow's attack, save Flight 447, protect hundreds of innocent families. "I know what you think of me," Volkov continued, his voice breaking slightly. "Arms dealer, terrorist enabler, merchant of death. You're not wrong, but she's everything good I ever did. Everything pure. The only reason I still breathe." Wick looked down at the girl, 12 years old, clutching a wooden soldier, trusting her father to keep her safe, just like Amara had trusted him. Chapter 5. "Please," Volkov whispered, tears now streaming down his face. "When you tell her what happened, tell her I tried to be good. Tell her the bad things I did were for her. Tell her Papa loved her more than his own life." The ceramic blade slid between the 4th and 5th ribs like it had been designed for this exact anatomy, which it had. Volkov's gasp was sharp, surprised, like a man realizing his exit had come without warning. His hand fell away from his pistol, fingers going nerveless as his brain processed damage that couldn't be repaired. "Papa." The word was so small, so trusting, like she was asking why he was playing a game she didn't understand. Volkov looked down at the knife in his chest, then at his daughter. His face changed, all the fear melted away, replaced by something soft and broken. "My sweet girl," he whispered, blood on his lips. "Papa is very tired. Papa has to sleep now." "No." She shook her head, pigtails bouncing. "We were going to have ice cream. You promised." "I know, baby, I know." His voice was getting weaker. "Be good for Grandmama, okay? Be my brave girl." He tried to reach for her face, but his hand wouldn't work right anymore. It fell to his side, fingers still twitching like they wanted to touch her one more time. The girl didn't understand. She pressed her small hands against the growing red stain on his shirt, trying to stop what couldn't be stopped. Her toy soldier lay forgotten beside them. "Papa, get up, please get up." Her voice was getting smaller, more scared. "I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. Just get up." But he couldn't get up. His eyes were already empty, staring at nothing while his daughter begged him to wake up. "Papa!" The scream that came out of her was pure pain, raw and animal and heartbroken. It was the sound of a child's world ending, the sound of learning that people you love can just stop. She threw herself across his chest, her little hands trying to shake him awake. "Don't leave me, Papa. Don't leave me alone. I'm scared, Papa. I'm scared." The bazaar had gone quiet around them. Strangers stopped and stared. Some covered their mouths. Some looked away, but the little girl just kept crying for her Papa to come back, not understanding that some things can't come back no matter how much you beg. Wick stepped back into the crowd as Turkish police sirens wailed in the distance. The remaining security operative was fighting through the chaos, but he was 30 seconds too late. The ISIS buyers were scattering in different directions, their briefcases suddenly useless weight. Turkish police, now swarming the scene, would ensure those stinger components went nowhere useful. "Target down," Wick reported, watching a 12-year-old girl learn that the world held more cruelty than math homework had prepared her for. "Stingers secured." Behind him, she was screaming for her father in Russian while Turkish police tried to understand why a Russian diplomat had died from a knife wound in the middle of the Grand Bazaar. Her voice followed him through the crowd, raw, broken, innocent, echoing off ancient stones that had witnessed too much grief to absorb anymore. Copy, extraction point Alpha, 10 minutes. Wick moved through the crowd toward the Bazaar's north exit, just another tourist who'd witnessed a tragic accident in one of Istanbul's most famous landmarks. The carpet merchant was explaining to anyone who'd listen that the crazy American had paid for carpet delivery, as if that made perfect sense. The ISIS buyers were discovering that briefcases full of missile components weren't much use without the man who knew how to make them functional. Overwatch to Wanderer. Keisha's voice carried hard-earned respect as he reached the extraction point. Mission accomplished. Methods unconventional, but effective. Something in her tone made Wick wonder if McAvoy had anticipated this exact scenario. The child, the moral choice, the way TF-77 seemed to know which buttons to push and when to push them. At the extraction cafe, Keisha waited with dry clothes and falsified documentation that would get him out of Turkey before diplomatic investigations began. She studied him with clinical assessment that had made her effective as both handler and reality check, noting the steadiness of his hands, the controlled breathing, the professional detachment that troubled her more than trembling would have. Volkov's dead, missiles secured, buyers scattered, she said, sliding a passport across the table with practiced nonchalance. Turkish authorities are calling it a robbery gone wrong. Russian embassies making diplomatic noise, but they can't prove anything. The girl's being sent to her grandmother in Moscow. Full medical coverage, private care, the works. Wick accepted the passport but said nothing. His hands were steady, steadier than they had any right to be. The clinical detachment troubled him more than trembling would have. The medical treatment, he said quietly, for her leukemia. Make sure she gets it. Already arranged, anonymous donation through a Swiss account. She'll get the best care available, experimental therapy, the works. Her father's death won't be for nothing. Keisha stood to leave but paused at his expression. You did the right thing, Wick. That child will have a future because 300 families on Flight 447 will too. Next time, maybe stick to the original plan. Sniper rifles are cleaner than knife work in crowded bazaars. But they both knew there wouldn't be a next time like this. Not exactly like this. There would be other missions, other impossible choices, other moments when protecting some innocents required traumatizing others. In the shadows where TF-77 operated, that was the price of keeping America safe. Someone else always paid it. Wick left the cafe and walked through Istanbul's ancient streets, past vendors selling normal things to normal people living normal lives. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between buildings that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, each leaving their own stains on stones that had absorbed too much blood to remember it all. As he reached the harbor where his extraction would take him back to whatever Andrew McAvoy had planned next, he heard it. Children's laughter from a nearby playground, innocent and bright and utterly oblivious to the violence that kept their world spinning. He stopped walking, listened to their joy, their careless happiness, their absolute faith that adults would keep them safe. Somewhere in Moscow, a 12-year-old girl was learning that such faith was sometimes misplaced. But somewhere over the Atlantic tomorrow night, 300 passengers would land safely in New York, never knowing their lives had been bought with a father's blood. The laughter continued, pure and untouchable, while Wick tried to calculate whether his protection was worth its cost. The mathematics never balanced, but he kept doing the equations anyway, because that's what Ghost did in the spaces between light and shadow, where America's necessary violence played out one orphaned child at a time. In his cargo pocket, Amara's photograph was still there, a reminder that some promises couldn't be kept, only honored through endless repetition of the choice between saving some and sacrificing others. Sam Wick was becoming exactly what TF-77 had recruited him to be, a ghost who cleaned up America's messes without leaving fingerprints, even when those fingerprints were marked in blood on Persian carpets and etched into a child's memory. The children's laughter followed him all the way to the extraction point, where another identity waited to carry him toward whatever mission would next test the boundaries between protection and harm. Thank you for listening, Wick. SCIMITAR by Chase Austin, brought to you by Thrillverse Media. The adventure continues in the next explosive installment of the Wick Files, and we hope you'll join us for the next thrilling chapter. We also invite you to explore Chase Austen's other series and characters, like Sam Wick action thrillers, Axel Monk action thrillers, freelancer action thrillers, and Aria Hunt FBI crime thrillers, as well as a variety of free short stories and bonus content available on our website, thechaseausten.com. We appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to having you with us again soon.